Hello micro community here for a health update. This video is going to go on the Vladimir Diary channel. Let's put 10 minutes on the clock and I'm going to share as best I can a health update. You may know that I have had ME for 22 plus years. You may also know that in August 2024 I got my first COVID and unfortunately I developed significant microvascular damage as a result. I'd become more disabled and more ill over the months that followed, with restrictions on my capacity to stand, with a lot of chest pain, a lot of suffocation. I thought this was bad, but I didn't know that it was going to get much, much worse as it did in April, when I spent a month in hospital. And at the beginning of that hospital stay, in the first of the two hospitals, I had an extreme event associated with the desaturation, and my partner still feels that I nearly died. From that moment on, which was in good part caused by the hospital refusing to give me oxygen, from that moment on, I have not been able to stand, even for a second. And when I say I can't stand even for a second, I don't mean that I have to stop standing when I try, because it's impossible. What I mean is that even standing with my arms resting on the wheelchair but my feet on the ground for a second sends me into a 2 or 3 day extreme hellish microvascular crisis. So there is an unbelievable incapacity for verticalization. My capacity to sit up has increased a little. So I would say that I broke my record a couple of weeks ago by sitting for an hour in a wheelchair while recording a main channel video about monarchism, the ideology that is doing the rounds and threatening our democracy. But then I had a crisis for many hours after. Having said this, my capacity to stand, I think, is now worse than it was in the hospital. In the hospital, I could probably get away with standing for a few seconds and then have bad consequences. Now, even a semi-verticalization as I try to move from the wheelchair to the bath can be completely catastrophic. So my capacity to stand is actually worse now than it was in hospital. I'm further away from being able to stand for even a second. Now, what are my emotions around my incapacity? My emotions are first that I want to spend more time in the wheelchair, because if I could do that sustainably, I could look after myself a bit better. And the fact that I can't do that is very challenging, because it means I'm 24/7 dependent on care. But the much more physical, complete, authentic emotional desire I have is just to stand. I am desperate to stand. I have dreams where I stand for a little bit with deleterious consequences, but I still stand, and I wake up thinking, "Ooh, maybe I can," and I realize, no, it's a dream. You can't. So I'm sort of drawn to Fred Astaire videos. When I watch a documentary on the screen, I think, oh my God, they're walking. I want to do that. So that's the thing I'm craving the most. And I don't want to go for a walk. I just want to be able to stand in one spot for 30 seconds without something catastrophic happening that takes me days to recover from. But this is just disability. What about levels of suffering? Unfortunately, levels of suffering are high. Much of the time, at least a few hours every day on average, I spend feeling so ill that I want to scream. Both in terms of a kind of feeling of just poison coursing through your veins, your microvessels, but also through these two kinds of nightmarish chest predicaments that some other people with long COVID microvascular damage might be familiar with. One I call a clamp, whereby you're just being asphyxiated like in a corset, and the other I call a shunt, and I am not literally referring to what is speculatively happening in me, which is microvascular shunting. I'm talking subjectively just about that feeling of two metal pipes rubbing inside you and your chest being not squashed from outside but pulled in from within. So levels of suffering are pretty extreme. I mean, we have research suggesting that ME is the most disability and suffering inducing condition on earth, except for all of those conditions which are fatal a few weeks out from death. But I would say that this is a different level of suffering to the suffering I experienced with ME. What's happening medically? I'm in good medical hands, but that's not enough to start getting me better. I'm seeing some of the best people in the UK and even outside of the UK by Zoom. And there are 4 or 5 treatment options, none of which are likely to make you better, but they're all worthy gambles. The first one is anticoagulation. Unfortunately, I'm reacting badly to the small dose of anticoagulation I started with, and I can't even get to the dose that I'm supposed to try to see if it makes me better. That's very typical with ME patients, that their systems are hyper-reactive to external interventions. That's a very difficult catch-22 because the other interventions are even more intrusive, and I need to be better to try them, but I need them to see if they can possibly make me better. Paradoxes. Now, I've said a little bit about functioning, a bit about suffering, a bit about being in good medical hands, but that's not necessarily helping. How am I doing emotionally? Except for the fact that I'm just desperate to walk. Desperate to stand for 11 seconds. I think that I'm doing extraordinarily well, and you can see that by my capacity to hold my community and be external when I do my work as a very minor public intellectual from bed. But there are some things I'm struggling with, and I think the main one is that I have not been able to process that for the first time in 44 years I lost the ability to stand, and that I'm not even wheelchair bound. I'm too sick to be in my wheelchair. All of this, the suffering, the disability, the medical infrastructure is so demanding. It's like flying a plane and trying to keep it in the air, that you don't have that much time to process what's actually happened. I've processed my inability to walk or even sit up sustainably, except in this super reclined position. I've processed it to a degree of about 12%. I haven't had the space to catch up with what's happened to me. And I'm doing my best to create that space. I'm doing my best to listen to what is going on in my unconscious mind and to let anything that is there healthily percolate toward conscious awareness. But it ain't easy, and it's also really difficult when in the very few moments that you're feeling a bit less hellish, you work. Because I'm so in love with my contribution to the culture, that's what I want to do. But at the same time, it means you don't have much time when you're feeling physically not so ill, so as to be free to process what's happening, you know. And it's actually easier to talk to the beautiful community about politics than it is to emotionally process what has happened to me, because after so many years of illness, I'm fairly well trained to speak and engage generously when I'm feeling ill. But you want a little bit more physical freedom to actually just listen to yourself emotionally. So that's the biggest thing. I'm flying the plane, and I haven't even properly process what's happened. So I do need to do some extra work on that unprocessed shock. Having said this, otherwise the mental health is luckily superb, but I can't, claim that that's guaranteed, because even if something psychologically can't go wrong for me, something biologically can go wrong with so much havoc being wreaked in the body that affects my brain chemistry. I can't rule that out. I'm conscious of that possibility. There is another possibility I'm conscious of, and that's that I could get worse, as indeed I did in April. So this is a story where thinking ahead for the next 3 months, 6 months, we're going to run to 12 minutes on this, is about just negotiating shark-infested waters with uncertain outcomes. Final remark. I have aching empathy for any of you going through something like this. And for those of you who are not going through this, I'll say the following. As a population, people with this illness that I've developed in last year, on top of Miami, won't recover without investment in research. We need to throw a couple of billion at this constructively. Funnily enough, we're actually taking bigger losses to our economies through people being ill with this condition than it would cost us to invest in it constructively and get these people better. Because just because this is incurable now doesn't mean it's difficult to fix in principle. So that's my little bit of politics and sociology to put this in context. Enough. Much love and thank you for taking the time with me. See you soon on the other channels.